Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, so let's talk about the world of Impact Wrestling, and let's talk about Minoru Suzuki. Yes, coming to Impact. This is a really big deal, really big deal. We know that Impact Wrestling has this working relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and we've seen various New Japan Pro Wrestling stars, Jay White, El Phantasmo, Finn Juice, etc. show up in Impact Wrestling. But Minoru Suzuki, yes, his American excursion is continuing. He's not just showing up in AEW and on the independent scene as well as New Japan Strong. He's showing up in Impact Wrestling as well because Minoru Suzuki is coming soon to Impact on Access TV. Minoru Suzuki is on his way to the promotion. Now, in a video package that aired on Thursday's Impact on Access TV broadcast, highlights from the New Japan Pro Wrestling career of The King aired, followed by a coming soon tease. Now, his debut will mark the first time that Minoru Suzuki has ever appeared for Impact Wrestling. As I mentioned, this follows the likes of Juice Robinson, David Finlay, Jay White, Satoshi Kojima, El Phantasmo, and other New Japan Pro Wrestling stars that have worked for Impact Wrestling, in Impact Wrestling, on Impact Wrestling broadcast this year. Now, recently, of course, as I mentioned, I think this is part of the reason why Suzuki's coming to Impact Wrestling is because Suzuki is on a tour of the United States. He's appeared for Game Changer Wrestling, GCW, PWX, West Coast Pro, in addition to New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong. He first appeared for AEW at AEW All Out, where he went face-to-face with John Moxley. The two then had a match on the following Dynamite, which then led to Suzuki teaming up with his former stablemate Lance Archer to face Moxley and Eddie Kingston in a lights-out match at the Grand Slam edition of AEW Rampage a few weeks later. As I mentioned, he just faced Bryan Danielson on AEW Rampage this past Friday, so Minoru Suzuki, his tour of America continues, and I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm a Minoru Suzuki fan. I think most people are because he is so unique in the sense that, of course, he's been going for such a long period of time, and his style is conducive to being able to go for such a long period of time, even though it's physical, even though it's violent and it's tough. He's not, in the sense, flashy or anything like that, and he can still go just as good as he could do in the past. If anything, his character becomes more, I don't know, physical and violent as he gets older because he turns into this sort of psychotic, crazy old man. It's kind of like the Terry Funk, you know? It's like the Terry Funk of New Japan, if you will. And I'm excited to see him come into Impact. I wonder who he'll face off against. That's really an interesting one. You can let me know in the comment section below. Who would you like to see Minoru Suzuki face off against in the world of Impact Wrestling? For me, and this just depends on when he comes in, I think when they're saying coming soon, I'm assuming they mean either he's going to have a match at Bound for Glory, or he's going to appear at Bound for Glory and set up a match, possibly, say, at Turning Point in November. That might be a possibility as well. If so, if your real goal in terms of getting a talent over, like a Josh Alexander, is to make him the Impact World Champion. Josh Alexander, for me, he's winning the Impact World Championship at Bound for Glory. I would be stunned if Christian Cage holds on to the Impact World title at Bound for Glory. So for me, Josh Alexander is going to win the Impact World title then later on this month. If you really wanted to continue to build up Josh Alexander, and that's what they've been doing ever since he split up with Ethan Page, or Ethan Page moved to AEW rather, and the North split, and Josh Alexander became the X Division champion, had these amazing matches, whether it's TJP Iron Man match, whether it's Ace Austin, whether it's El Phantasmo, whether it's Ultimate X match at Slammiversary, all of these amazing matches that Josh Alexander's been having, and then he'll beat Christian Cage as well, which further elevates him, signifies him as the guy, the man in Impact Wrestling as the world champion. If you wanted to continue that momentum, if you wanted to continue telling your audience, telling social media, telling the world that not only is Josh Alexander our champion, but he's a real big deal, he's the guy, he's one of the best wrestlers on the planet today, you'd have him have a really competitive match against a Minoru Suzuki, because it's an established name, it's a well-known name, and it's a name, let's face it, it's not afraid to put people over. We've seen him put over the likes of Bryan Danielson, of Moxley, of all of these guys. So he's not afraid to put people over. He knows he's bulletproof. It doesn't matter. So I think that's a real possibility there. I think we could see maybe Josh Alexander versus Minoru Suzuki. Of course, there are other names in Impact Wrestling he could go up against. We're talking Moose, maybe W.Morrissey, Eddie Edwards as well is a name that he's gone off against some of the New Japan stars in the past. I just think the biggest match and the best match, and Minoru Suzuki, again, such a big name, it would have to be Josh Alexander for me. But you can let me know in the comment section below. Who would you like to see Minoru Suzuki face off against? Who would you like to see him face off against? And it's great to see Suzuki to start to blossom outside of New Japan. Whilst he's always going to be, of course, connected to New Japan Pro Wrestling, and the fact he's making all of these appearances in the United States, especially in these major promotions like AEW and Impact, is because of New Japan's relationship with both companies. It's just so interesting and exciting to see him in so many different settings, isn't it? Because, of course, the guy's 53 years old, which is amazing that he's still performing at this level and he's still so popular and over. He spent the majority of his career, 33 years, by the way, in-ring career with New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's been a multiple-time world champion. He's had reigns with the IWGP Intercontinental Championship, the Never Openweight Championship. He's a legend. He's an absolute legend. And we know that obviously there's going to be a lot of outside influence on the Bound for Glory show. They mentioned it at Slammiversary earlier this year, didn't we? We're going to have not just Impact Wrestling, we're going to have AAA, we're going to have AEW, and we're going to have New Japan Pro Wrestling all on that show. We just don't know what names from which company are going to be appearing on that show. We know Christian Cage, I guess, represents AEW. There is a ton of people that could represent New Japan, whether it is Finn Juice, whether it's El Phantasmo. El Phantasmo is confirmed for the show. Maybe Minoru Suzuki's the other name. AAA, we don't really know who could be showing up there. We've just got some new AAA World Tag Team Champions. So who's to say that the AAA World Tag Team Champions, that being FTR, don't show up on the show as well? There is so much there. There really is so much there there's to be excited about when it comes to the whole Forbidden Door and Impact Wrestling. But Minoru Suzuki, really, really excited about that one. And I'm just fascinated to see how long his stay is in Impact Wrestling. If it's anything to go by all of the other New Japan appearances for Impact, excluding Finn Juice, because I think they're a bit atypical. I think if we're going to look at all the other New Japan appearances, it's either going to be a one-off or he's going to be there for a set of TV tapings. That's going to be it. So I think maybe he shows up at Bound for Glory, or he has a match at Bound for Glory, and then maybe he's involved in maybe Turning Point, and then does the Turning Point set of TV tapings. I think that might be it. He's not going to be around for a long period of time. We know that. That's how the New Japan and Impact Wrestling relationship works. But it's very exciting nevertheless, and fascinated to see who he goes up against. I really am. Let's talk about Bound for Glory, because Heath has finally signed a contract with Impact Wrestling. Yes, even though he made his debut for Impact Wrestling in, was it July 2020? Now, in October 2021, the saga when it comes to Heath actually signing his Impact Wrestling contract is finally at an end, even though he was signed ages ago, obviously. But in terms of kayfabe storyline, Heath has finally signed his Impact Wrestling contract. Now, in fairness, the deal was earned at last year's Bound for Glory, but Heath was put on the shelf due to the injury he sustained during the Call Your Shot Gauntlet Battle Royal at the event. So he went through the proper steps for recovery, and now Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott DeBoer honored his word and made him an official member of the Impact Wrestling roster this past week on Access TV. However, Heath had one important condition before putting pen to paper on his Impact Wrestling contract. Heath requested a tag team match against Violent by Design at Bound for Glory on October 23. The idea is for Heath to reconnect with his best friend Rhino and undo Eric Young's brainwashing at the pay-per-view. This will be easier said than done, though, especially since Rhino is kind of absent right now. He didn't seem thrilled to see Heath return last week, and he kind of really wants to get back in the good graces of Eric Young and Violent by Design, it would appear. Now, last week, Heath only gave Rhino a few minutes' notice to show up in the ring for a conversation. This resulted badly, of course, when Rhino did not show up and Violent by Design attacked Heath. With 10 days before Bound for Glory, perhaps this gives Rhino enough time to learn of the match, even if he takes a messenger pigeon to deliver his news. If Rhino no-shows, then Heath must accept the consequences and wrestle alone against Violent by Design at Bound for Glory. So I think it seems relatively obvious that the idea is that Rhino will reunite with Heath. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be as straightforward as, you know, it's just, so Violent by Design come out, Heath comes out, he's looking around, all this kind of stuff, and then Rhino comes out and they just have the match. I don't think they'll go in that direction. I think the direction that they will go in at Bound for Glory is maybe that Rhino doesn't come out with Heath initially. I don't even think they'll go with the whole, oh, Heath has to take him on in a handicap match kind of deal. I don't think they will. I think I could certainly see a situation whereby Heath comes out and no one, basically Rhino's told him either on Impact this week or in the Countdown to Glory or whatever it may be prior to the actual pay-per-view, or even maybe in a backstage segment during the pay-per-view. I could see a situation whereby Rhino says to Heath, look, I'm not going to come out with you. I'm not, it's not going to happen. Or Heath can't find Rhino, whatever it may be. So Heath has to find another partner. Now, who would that partner be? Well, Heath's had a few during his career. Maybe we see one of the social outcasts come back, right? Maybe we see, I don't know, Curtis Axel or Bo Dallas or Adam Rose or whatever it may be. That's a possibility. It's not out of the realm. It's not out of the realm of possibility that could happen. So maybe it's another tag team partner, and they get beaten the hell out of by Violent by Design. There's 3 of them, of course. So all 3 beating the hell out of Heath and whoever his tag team partner is, and then Rhino comes out, and then Rhino comes to the ring and hits the gore, and then he reunites with Heath. Maybe that's the direction that they go in there. So I think that's a possibility. The whole Heath storyline, it was so crazy. Like, again, if you know me on the channel, if you've watched any of my Impact Wrestling videos I've done in the past, you'll know I wasn't a massive fan on essentially them rehashing the Heath Slater free agent storyline from 2016, because that's what they did, right? Remember when they had the brand extension again in WWE? Heath wasn't assigned to a draft, so he was a free agent. He was going from Raw to SmackDown, trying to get signed. Eventually, he did get signed on SmackDown with Rhino, won the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, the first ever SmackDown Tag Team Champions, all that kind of stuff. They basically did that when Heath showed up in Impact last year, and I was kind of like, it feels like a rehash, and I wanted Heath to be a more serious character because he showed glimpses of that when he showed up on Raw earlier that year after he was released, and I thought that's what Heath Slater can be. Heath can be a world champion, and when I saw him last year in Impact and he was being comedic again, I thought you don't need to do that. So I was pitching the idea that maybe at Bound for Glory that Heath and Rhino would be the final 2 or something like that, or they'd win the match and then Heath turned on Rhino and was like, screw you, I've got my contract, I used you to get my contract, now it's all about me, now I go on and use my Call Your Shot trophy to win the world championship or something like that. Just a little bit different, try something different, try a new character. That's one of my biggest frustrations is when these names get let go from WWE or they don't sign a new contract with WWE or whatever, and they go somewhere else and they just do the same gimmick. I always think it's just an opportunity to reinvent yourself, do something different. That's why I've been critical of, say, Matt Cardona in Impact Wrestling, because he did the same gimmick. And yet, on the indie scene with GCW, he's doing a completely different gimmick. And guess what? He's getting over because he's doing something different. And I want to see the same thing in Impact. So I still hope that even when Heath wins his match at Bound for Glory, because I think they'll win, then maybe Heath turns on Rhino or does something different, because I just want to see something different. That's just my feeling on it, because I do think he's capable of more, but we'll have to wait and see. Speaking of Bound for Glory and the Call Your Shot Gauntlet, W.Morrissey will be entering the match last, because W.Morrissey is one step closer to calling his shot at Glory. Now, Morrissey previously declared his intentions to participate in the Call Your Shot Gauntlet match at Bound for Glory later this month. Now, essentially, if you're not familiar, it's basically Impact Wrestling's equivalent of the Royal Rumble, whereby you come in scheduled intervals. There's 20 people in, they come in, it's a battle royale, and then when you got to the last 2, it turns into a match, like a pinfall match. Now, names that have been declared for the match at Bound for Glory include W.Morrissey, Moose, Ace Austin, Madman Fulton, Chris Sabin, Matt Cardona, Brian Myers, Jake Something, P.T. Williams, Fowler Barr, Drama King, Hernandez, Black Taurus, Laredo Kid, Raj Singh, Johnny Swinger, Rachel Ellering, Kimberly, Brandy Lauren, and Alicia Edwards. They went to the ring for a battle royale. And basically, this battle royale was to determine the person who was going to be the last entrant in this Call Your Shot Gauntlet match. However, the stipulation was that the last person to be eliminated would actually be the first person in the Battle Royale. So the final 2 were W.Morrissey and Chris Sabin, and of course Sabin is going to be the number 1, and W.Morrissey is going to be the last person in there. Now, obviously, a lot of people will say, oh, he's the last person in there, so he's not going to win. There's a real chance he could win. I've been saying before that I think it's probably going to be W.Morrissey or Moose that win the match. And I wouldn't be surprised, given the way that W.Morrissey has been booked, if he wins this match. I really wouldn't be surprised. And I mentioned before that for me, I think post Bound for Glory, because again, Josh Alexander is going to win the Impact World Championship, it's going to be all about making matches that continue to get over Josh Alexander and continue to solidify him as the top guy in Impact. W.Morrissey hasn't lost yet. He's undefeated. So I could really see a situation whereby W.Morrissey wins the match, even against a Moose. They're the final 2 people. W.Morrissey wins. Moose turns into a babyface. They feud until, say, I don't know, the end of the year, and then W.Morrissey at Hard to Kill says, right, now I'm going to cash in my Call Your Shot Gauntlet trophy, and I'm going to challenge for the Impact World Championship at Hard to Kill, and that's how you sell a pay-per-view. And then, as I mentioned, for the remainder of this year, the two feud against each other, Moose and W.Morrissey, because they basically said that they're a tag team via circumstance almost. That's their focus is on being singles competitors, but it's basically a mutually beneficial tag team relationship, if you will. So I think W.Morrissey will win. I think the domination is going to continue. Now, people will say, that's predictable, Owen. I always say this, predictability isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's all about the execution. So I've liked the booking of W.Morrissey in Impact. They're obviously building him for something big, pun intended. But I think eventually, like with any heel, you have to build them up so high that eventually the babyface that defeats them gets over even more. And I think that babyface will be Josh Alexander. I really do. Speaking of Bound for Glory as well, we have the final lineup for the X Division Championship match at the show, because El Phantasmo concluded the X Division title tournament this past week by defeating Rohit Raju and Willie Mack. He will now meet Trey Miguel and Steve Macklin in a triple threat match for the vacant X Division Championship at Bound for Glory. So, as I mentioned, we've got the three guys in there. I've mentioned before, and by the way, this should be a great match, but I've mentioned before that irrespective of kind of who went in to the match as the final participant, because obviously we knew Macklin and Trey Miguel were going to be in there, I've always felt it would probably be Trey Miguel, to be honest with you. Obviously, I guess you do have to look at, we're just coming off of a babyface X Division Championship reign, so there is a possibility it could be Steve Macklin, that they want to go for something different. Steve Macklin, ever since he came into Impact, he said that the one championship he wanted to win was the X Division Championship. Now, I don't know, of course, if that's always been Impact's plan from the start, and that's the plan that they'd kind of sold to Steve Macklin of, you'll come in, Josh Alexander's going to drop the belt, he's going to go and challenge for the World Championship, and then you're going to be the X Division Champion. I don't know. So it will be certainly interesting to see how they go with that one. I think Trey Miguel is a good fit. He's your prototypical X Division star. He's essentially a throwback, to the X Division stars of the early days of TNA wrestling, of your AJ Styleses, Amazing Reds, etc. So I appreciate that. And Trey Miguel hasn't won a singles championship, has he, in Impact Wrestling? I mean, just over a year ago, he was challenging for the Impact World Championship at Slammiversary. You kind of forget that he was involved in that elimination match for the vacant Impact World Championship at Slammiversary last year. So maybe it is his time. Maybe it is his time to win the X Division Championship. That's why he kind of came back to Impact, of course, that he didn't sign with WWE with the rest of the Rascals because of family issues, personal issues, and he said, now I'm back in Impact, I want to challenge for singles championships. And I think he probably thought the World Championship, but you've got to get one under your belt eventually. So I think that it's going to be Steve Macklin or Trey Miguel. I would be very surprised if they had a New Japan star hold the X Division Championship. Not that that's never been done before by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it would probably be Macklin or Trey Miguel. The only thing that's making me say it might be Macklin, even though I'm leaning more towards Trey Miguel, is just because we've come off a babyface championship reign. But we'll find out closer to the time. We'll do predictions and previews as we get closer to the time anyway, but should be a great match, no doubt about it. Now, Lady Frost. We spoke about Lady Frost a couple of times here on the channel when it comes to Impact Wrestling. Well, Lady Frost was reportedly offered a contract from Impact Wrestling, according to Fightful Select. This is a report that came out yesterday. Now, Lady Frost has appeared 3 times on Impact Wrestling, most recently in a match against Savannah Evans. She lost to Evans on the October 14 edition of Impact Wrestling. Now, as noted in the report by Fightful, the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA, actually made her an offer months ago, but neither party could agree on a deal. Of course, Lady Frost appeared on NWA Empower. I think she actually appeared at some of the Power tapings as well. I don't keep massively up to date with the NWA because that show and that booking is crazy. Nevertheless, she's appeared on various other promotions as well, such as Ring of Honor. She wrestled actually for WWE on an edition of Monday Night Raw against Asuka in 2018. She's also appeared at AEW events too on Dark and Dark Elevation. So I don't know. I think she's kind of sort of testing the waters out there. Obviously, I think with all of the contract offers she's receiving, I think Impact would probably be a really great fit for her. As I mentioned before, in my opinion, outside of WWE being the number one place for women's wrestling in North America, I think Impact Wrestling is second, even though I do think AEW is improving, especially from where they were. But we've known that Impact Wrestling have wanted to sign Lady Frost for a while. As I mentioned, we spoke about it here on the channel at least a couple of times, I remember. So it'll be interesting to see if they can come to a deal. We know that Impact have been re-signing or signing up new Knockout, Slamovich, etc. And obviously they had a really successful Knockouts Knockdown event as well. So interesting to see if Lady Frost does indeed side on the dotted line on what's going to be going on with her Impact Wrestling future. But the Knockouts division continues to get stronger. The Inspiration, Slamovich, and now possibly Lady Frost coming in as well, which is very exciting too. Speaking of the Knockouts division, Mickie James is going to have her first match inside of an Impact Wrestling ring in almost 6 years in the go-home show to Bound for Glory on Impact Wrestling, because the Knockouts champion Deonna Purrazzo has handpicked Savannah Evans as Mickie James' opponent in their Pick Your Poison stipulation. Evans officially accepted the offer, and the two will collide next week on Impact Wrestling. Now, James chose, as I mentioned, Masha Slamovich as Purrazzo's competitor, who she successfully defeated in a non-title match at Knockouts Knockdown last weekend. Of course, Slamovich was offered that Impact Wrestling contract that we spoke about on Wednesday. Now she's officially part of the Knockouts roster. So, interesting one. I'm excited to see Mickie James back inside of an Impact Wrestling ring. She'll beat Savannah Evans, obviously, no doubt about it, and it's meant to get over Mickie James as a credible threat to Deonna Purrazzo, which of course she is. Even though, again, I think the match will be great at Bound for Glory. I tell you, honestly, even though Josh Alexander and Christian Cage are the main event, and they will be the main event at Bound for Glory, there would be a real possibility that Deonna Purrazzo and Mickie James could be the main event of that show. If Impact wanted to make a statement, they would do that, but I don't think they will, because Josh Alexander will win the World Championship, etc. But I think Deonna Purrazzo is going to win that match at Bound for Glory. I've said that time and time again. You've got all of these legends essentially lining up to put over Deonna Purrazzo because of the work she's doing. Whether that's Thunder Rosa, Melina, Mickie James, Purrazzo essentially beaten every knockout there is to beat in Impact right now. A couple more names coming in, and I think that's the reason why, is to continue to have competition. But it'll be a great match, no doubt about it. As I mentioned, Mickie James will win on Impact next week. But I'm very excited, very, very excited to see Mickie James versus Deonna Purrazzo at Bound for Glory, even though I think Deonna Purrazzo is going to retain her title once again. But look, guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news videos we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Got the rankings, and you get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.